me rubbing my nose a lot, it just itches. Itches. Amen. And I would tell you why, but I'm not going to tell you why. It just itches. Amen. Revelation chapter number 8 tonight. You get this in your hands. For you that kind of new to this, what I'm doing all the way through Revelation, I'm trying to give you a general outline that I put out. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Everybody get them. All right, I'm going to put these up here. By the way, I keep some extras of these in there from each week. If somebody misses one once more, I try to keep them kind of together. What I want to do when we get through with the book of Revelation, I want you to have a pretty good handle on the book. I think it's one of the greatest books in the Bible. It's the only one that has a threefold blessing. The he that readeth, the he that heareth, and the he that doeth. He gives a threefold blessing to that only book in the Bible that he does that too. Revelation's important because we're zeroing in on where we were. Chapter number 1 were the things which were. Chapter 2 and 3 were the church age. Chapter 4 and following is the rapture of the church. We're in heaven. And now they're having a hard time down here, friend, but it's a hard time, most of them of their own choosing. If you look in A, you find a reprieve in chapter number 7. God gave a reprieve. He did a couple of things. One, he had the angels hold the winds of the earth. That's a steal. Anybody ever been to steal before the storm? I've been where a tornado was coming, and all of a sudden, front said it got deathly quiet. Not a leaf stirring anywhere, not even a mouse. I mean, nothing was moving at that time. What he did, he stopped everything, and he did a couple of things in chapter number 7. What he did in chapter number 7 was, first, he sealed 144,000 witnesses. Greatest preachers who have ever lived. These are men, it'll deal with them again in chapter number 7. They were men that were virgins. They were not married. They were men that had dedicated their entire life to Almighty God. These were sold out Jews, 12,000 of each of the 12 tribes. And if you've ever seen somebody on fire for God, you let a Jew get saved. And I'm talking, these people, they were on fire for God. God let them witness. I don't know for how long. The Bible doesn't say. But we find that a multitude that could not be numbered got saved. Amen. Well, we find a bigger multitude that cannot be numbered continue to reject. Now, after chapter number 6, you'd think people would be smart enough to say, hey, Lord. But they don't do that. You know, when people, I call it jailhouse religion. When they get in jail, they always want somebody to come down and pray with them. They always get saved, you know. And then when they get out of jail, they're right back where they started from. But next time they get in jail, I've got one guy, every time he's in jail, he called me up and said, preacher, I got right with God. I'm talking about half a dozen times over probably the last 20 years. Every time I hear his voice, I know he got right with God. But when he comes in, he got all the crosses hanging around his neck. He got everything going on, and next thing going right back. What happened was, when they got a reprieve, a multitude of people got saved, but a multitude of people rejected God. Get to chapter number 8. He's opening this 7th seal, and the Bible says, in verse 1, there was silence in heaven about the space of an half hour. Now, let me explain this silence. In heaven, everybody's been rejoicing, right? Have you ever seen a child, you got one child that's an obedient child, you got one that's not so obedient, and the parent gives a command, and one child just looks at him and said, I'm not going to do it. The other child looks at them, and then looks up at that parent, and suddenly it gets quiet. Those in heaven understand the almighty power of a thrice holy God. I mean, they're in heaven with him. They see his throne. They see his sitting. They see everything around him. That he controls the heavens and the earth and all that in them is. He owns this thing, and these people on earth have once again thumbed their nose at God when He gave them a reprieve. Things got quiet. Expectancy. Knowing that God was going to react to that rejection with such power that all of heaven got quiet. That's what we find here. Verses 3 and 4, we find Him offering incense before God. I mean, the prayers of the saints are going up. They put incense, and the angels censer and coals off of the fire. And what does God have them do? God has them cast it into the earth. There comes a time, friend, when you're going to get what you deserve. There's going to come a time when the praise that they cried for the mountains and the rocks to fall upon them. They cried out to even die in chapter number 6, and God wouldn't let them. Now God is going to do something, and we're going to look tonight at the first of the 4 trumpets. 4 trumpets that we're going to deal with in these verses. If you look in verse number 5, the trumpets are ready to sound, and the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, cast it into the earth. There were voices and thunders and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Now, I want to look at that first angel just for a moment. The first angel sounds. Look at verse number 7. The first angel sounded, and there fell hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of trees were burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. If you look under E here, we find the destruction of vegetation. I want to open this first trumpet up by saying this, that the ecology of this earth is in a delicate balance. You find in God's nature, listen, this is no randomness out here, friend. Everything has its job to perform. Everything is there for a purpose. God didn't put an ant here without a purpose for the ant. I think about those armadillos digging up my ground. They're aerating my grass, and they're taking a lot of grubs and things out of the ground. They're, I guess, in the anteater family. The ecology of the earth. I'm talking about the balance of nature. God balanced this thing to where in the beginning He looked on everything He had made, and He said it was what? Very good. Very good. In other words, you can't add to it. He did it right. Did it right the first time, and now God's going to start dealing with the ecology of this earth. What's the ecology? It's just simply that balance of nature. I thought about the hail. What does hail do? It makes people run for cover. How many like to stand out in a hailstorm? Pardon me, I hate this thing. I've seen hail as large as golf balls. I remember years ago in Kentucky, I just got out of the military. We had an old car, I think it was Chevrolet. And boy, we had a hailstorm come up, they were the size of golf balls. Back in those days when we rolled out the windows on the mobile home, you know, all these little window slats rolled out. Y'all remember those? That hail went through every glass pane. It was so bad, Barbara and I sat on the bed in our bedroom and took if I'm not mistaken, took a drawer and put it over our head. It sounded like it was coming through the top of that mobile home that we were living in. It tore every roof off. It beat every car up. It killed cattle out in the fields. Now, we're not talking about a great killing one here because there's no mention of any death. But what hail does is hail breaks down your vegetation. It'll destroy your crops in the field. It will beat plant life down. So we found a great hail, and we found the destruction of vegetation. If you notice, he said that it fell, it was hail, and fire mingled with blood. Now, he used 2 more things. Another was fire. You find this over in the book of Exodus. One of the the 10 plagues that God brought, it said that there was hail and fire ran around across that ground. But then we find also that a third part of the trees were burned up and all green grass. Now, When he's talking about a third part of the trees, he's not talking about in one spot in the world all the trees burned up and they were okay someplace else. He's talking about every third tree. Can you imagine living in the woods or any place else and every third tree is on fire? That's what he said. A third part of the trees. But then notice we stand in all green grass was burned up. All of the grass. Everything burned up. You've got fire all around. I think of these fires out west that they're having out here. Listen, they try to get away from those things. This is one you can't get away from because it's all around. 1/3 of the trees, all of the grass will be burned up. Now let's go back to the ecology just for a second. Trees are and grass, they do more than just look green and bear fruit. They use a process that's called photosynthesis. It's a lot of times when things dry up, you'll see things begin to brown out. But if you ever notice the instant it rains, within just an hour or two, things start greening back up again. What happens through photosynthesis, these plants begin to make chlorophyll. That chlorophyll is the green color that you see. But they do something else. Plants are very important. I don't like to see them cutting the amount of timber that they cut, clear cutting and just huge masses. Because when you breathe, you need something called oxygen. Oxygen or O2. God set this atmosphere up with 20.9% oxygen. We used to just round it off, say you need 21% oxygen to have good, healthy air for you to breathe. But what you're doing is breathing in usable O2, oxygen, and you're blowing out carbon dioxide or CO2. That's what comes out of your lungs. It's breathable, but you don't get anything because CO2 is more stable, and we find that you don't get anything from it. Now, what happens, and I'm just dealing with the ecology, so what your plant life does, it thrives on CO2. But it takes CO2 through this thing called photosynthesis, making the chlorophyll, and your trees and your greenery release oxygen or O2 back into the air. So what we find in here is God's going to, one, start making the air to where it's not very breathable. Back in the early days, I worked in the mines. They would take a canary into the mines, and they'd take it in a little cage and carry that in. They didn't have the monitors that we had, didn't have the airflow that we had. Last mine I worked at, we had 375,000 cubic feet of air a minute coming into that mine through your intake shaft and out the other side. Huge amounts of air. Back in those days, they didn't have it. So what happens is they're breathing, they're setting off explosions. It uses up the oxygen, and if you're not careful, it comes to the point that you'll pass out and eventually die if somebody doesn't get you there. A canary cannot survive under 17% oxygen. So his job was, he became the martyr for the people that were down there. If that canary dropped dead, friend, they started backing up. They used to call it black damp. They thought it was gas. It wasn't gas. It was just simply a lack of oxygen. We find here the ecology of this earth has to be greatly affected at this time. 1/3 of the trees and all of the grass is now gone. That makes what you've got unhealthy to even breathe, much less with the smoke that is given off in that thing. So we find the first trumpet, God begins the destruction of nature itself around these individuals. What's a fearful thing when you see this destruction in nature, be it hurricanes, be it fire, be it whatever. It's a terrible thing to see. You're talking about shock and awe. This is going to be shock and awe around this earth. The first mention over in Exodus, he talked about a rain of very grievous hail, and we find it. So we find the hail, we find the fire, it's burning everywhere, and then he said it's mingled with blood. Have you ever got blood splattered all over you? Now, nowadays we kind of stay away from somebody else's blood. I had an accident in front of us several years ago, and a woman got out the window, staggered, and fell. And I went over to help her, and I started getting covered with blood because she had blood on her, just sticky blood all over the place. Now, I wasn't too worried about getting some blood on me, but blood is mingled in, so they're getting splattered with blood at the same time. Boy, what a terrible thing. That first trumpet. In the second trumpet, we find in verse 8 and 9, he said, in 8, the second angel sounded, and it was as it were a great mountain burning with fire. It was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. So the second thing God does, now everything's burning up. There's blood on everybody, blood everywhere. He cast, as it were, a mountain. It's not actually a mountain, but as it were means something in just great size. I remember when Mount St. Helens blew up. I guess, a cubic mile or something like that of earth blew at one time. Boy, the destruction of that thing. One guy was up on a mountain miles away from that, and that's the last thing he ever filmed. They never found him. He was standing up there filming that thing at a distance, didn't know it was going to go off. Tremendous thing. He said in here, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. So we find the third part of the ocean now is blood. You say, well, why not the whole ocean? You ever seen oil slicks? We have had that problem some down in the Gulf. Sometimes these offshore drilling and things, they have leaks. When they do, it kills a lot of animal life, kills a lot of plant life. They go down there, they actually try to suction a lot of that petroleum off of the top of that water because it just simply lays on top of that water, and the blood's the same way. Now, notice what happened. The third part of that sea became blood. We like our oceans, don't we? How many like to go to the ocean? Come on. All right. I think about everybody here does. As Christians don't go to the beach, they go to the coast. All right, we go to the coast. I love to go down there. I can sit and watch the waves come in all day long. I never get tired of watching the waves come in. I look for fins, be it sharks or otherwise. I'll never forget not long ago, Barbara and I went down on the fishing pier down at Myrtle Beach, and people all over the beaches and everything. We went out on the fishing pier, and I watched them feeding the sharks. Anybody ever been on that pier down there at the National Park? Right past where y'all stay down there. They've got a fishing pier. You go into the National Park, costs you about $6 for all day. Go down, they got a fishing pier. What happens is they're out on this fishing pier, and they're cleaning fish, and they're throwing the heads and everything over the side. And I looked down there, and there must have been 10 or 12 sharks. The smallest one I saw was about 10 feet long. Now, we're talking about great white sharks. And they were fighting in that water over what was going. Now, every now and then they quit feeding them, and I'd see them go under the piers, under the pilings of that pier, and go down toward the shore. I don't know how far they went, but I thought to myself, these people down there in that water have no idea what's down here less than 100 yards from where they're at, and now they're swimming toward the shore. We like our oceans. We like the sea. We like to go to SeaWorld. We like to go to Marineland. We like to go to these places. We like to go to these aquariums. We like our oceans. Now we're seeing that beautiful place being destroyed. But notice in verse number 9, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. Now you've got fish floating up everywhere. What happens to these fish? They begin to float up. I've seen places where rivers, where the water went bad, where they had poisoned it through dumping things into the water, and you see where they're poisoned and everything. 1/3 of the animals. Do you realize how many fish and how many things are in that ocean that you're looking out at? I don't get in the ocean because there are things that eat fat creatures. I get real nervous. I can't tell a dolphin from a shark. All I see, and I sit out there, and I feel like, boy, there's one coming underwater, it'd be at 20 miles an hour, just as fast as it can go. And there I am sitting out there. No, I stay up where the sand is. I don't go in there. But a third part of the animal life. Notice what he said, and then a third part of the ships that are out there. Can you imagine how many ships are out on that sea? I'm talking about all the seas together. You go over in Thailand, you go over in China, you go in these places, these people fish in small boats everywhere. Matter of fact, you go in some of those places, I guess they live on those boats, and there's so many in those little harbors you can just walk from boat to boat around in there. A third part of the boats, these ships, are destroyed in that sea. So God's not only touching what we have here on the earth, but He's also touching what is in there. What is the sea? The sea is the septic tank of the world. Salt is a cleanser. When we were boys, we used to brush our teeth with salt. We couldn't always get Colgate or whatever. We couldn't get all that sometimes, so we sometimes use baking soda. But you can put salt on a brush, and it's abrasive. And what happens is it's a real cleanser. That you brush your teeth with salt, it will clean your teeth. Now, you may get thirsty for a while, but it'll clean your teeth. What happens is all of our waters run to the sea. They carry everything that we put in them to the sea. That sea through two things. One, brine, and two, motion. That motion is an agitator. It's just like you ladies, when you put clothes, you put them in the washing machine and they start churning. And what it does, it takes all of that out of that water, and you've still got salt water. It falls to the bottom of the ocean. The fish feed off of it. It does its purpose down there. Then you have evaporation. That's part of your water cycle. It evaporates clear water up off of that ocean, brings it in and rains and drops back down again. Just something everybody here is familiar with. God is now taking that septic tank and making it where it becomes unusable. You ever had your septic tank flow up? Now you got your water cycles that are messed up. You've got everything messed up. So we find He hits nature. He hits the earth. The third angel, verse number 10. The Bible said, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of water. Now, if you like astronomy, let me tell you something. You say, how can a star fall and fall into our water systems? The same God that spoke it into existence can do anything He wants to with it. I want you to understand, I am a literalist when it comes to the Word of God. He didn't say as it was a star. He said there fell a great star. I dealt this morning about the Bethlehem star. Everybody saw that. You had Venus and you had Jupiter, and kind of in close proximity up there, and it was kind of pretty. That was not a Bethlehem star. One, they're two planets. They're not stars. The second thing, that's not what they saw in Bethlehem, because that star came and set over Nazareth. Those wise men never went to Bethlehem. They went to Nazareth, where the young child was, not a babe. They went there. That was His star. That's what the Bible, we have seen His star. It was something individual. Now, God takes a great star from heaven. I don't know which one it is. Boy, isn't that thing magnificent out here? How many like astronomy? Come on, everybody. Like when I was in college, we used to have one of them big things. You get in at Western Kentucky University. I said this morning, I spent a lot of time in the Kelly Thompson Science Complex, and you lay back and you watch they put all of the constellations up there. I've been in those things. I enjoy that. This thing is so immense out here. They cannot even comprehend how big it is. Somebody said, why did God make it that big? Two reasons. One, to glorify God, and two, to confound dumb people that don't want to recognize the God that put it up there. God put it up there for a reason, all right? There's for signs and they're for seasons, and now He's going to start messing with the heavens. He's already messed with the earth. He's already messed with the waters of the earth. And now he's doing something with the heavens. And over what he does, there's a great star fell from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. It fell upon the third part of the waters and upon the fountains of the waters. Now, two things. One, a third of the waters, but it fell upon the fountains of the waters. That's where it all starts. That's where it all begins. All of these rivers you see in America have what we call the head of the river, where all these tributaries start feeding into the Missouri and into the Ohio and all the way up. You find it coming down off of mountains, coming out of springs. Many of you have had springs. Did you know there's fresh water springs under the ocean? You say, how do you know the Bible is right? Because thousands of years ago, Job mentioned the springs in the ocean. Hey, he didn't have scuba gear. He knew there was fresh water down there because God told him there was fresh water down. He knew a woman had an invisible seed because God told him. Hey, your Bible is right. So what happens is, it fell upon the fountain. Now look at verse number 11. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. I took a little bit of time to look up wormwood. Okay, wormwood's been around for a long time. It's a very bitter herb. It was at times used for medicinal purposes, and like all herbs, they have medicinal purposes. Now, a lot of you are on natural things that you buy from Walmart, and listen, God gave us herbs. I believe God gave us a lot of things that can help our healing, and no, not all of them will cure cancer. But they have their place, and they have that, and wormwood did. But they found out something. If you used wormwood in a certain way, it caused you to hallucinate. Say it out loud. There you go, hallucinate. I'm like Dr. Cypher. I remember him preaching one time, had Dr. Horn behind him back there, and he came to that word, Lake Gennesaret. He could not say Gennesaret. Every time while he was preaching, he'd look back and say, Dr. Horn, say that word. He'd say Gennesaret. He'd say, yeah, that's it. And he'd preach. When he came to it again, he'd have Brother Ralph Horn use that word. Sometimes I get my tongue tied around my eye teeth, can't see what I'm saying. But they found out they could use it for drugs. Hey, they do that. Do you know that there are certain frogs that if you lick their belly, you can get high? How do people figure that? Who goes around licking frogs' bellies to find out they can get high on them? And mushrooms that grow out of cow patties. Come on, man. Hey, these people have got to be nuts to find out what they've got going on down here. But this thing called wormwood, so what they did, eventually they outlawed the use of it. I just wanted to throw that in. But the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were bitter. God is using the heavens to destroy this earth, to make this earth uninhabitable. So we find the first three. Now, we have silence because of the power of them. Now, in verses 12 and 13, we're going to deal with 12 very quickly. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon. The sun darkened by 1/3. The moon darkened. Everybody knows the effect of this. If you darken that moon or put the fire out or sun, and listen, we've got to have heat. Now the elements themselves become hot in places, cold in places. But what he's doing, he's darkening. He did that over in Egypt. He talked about a darkness that could be felt. If you've ever been in a cave, a lot of you have been in a cave, Mammoth Cave or Carlsbad Caverns or wherever you go. I've been in all of them. I used to get me. I worked in a hole in the ground 5 days a week, and on Saturday I asked Barbara, where are you and the kids want to go? And they said, we want to go to Mammoth Cave. I thought I'd been in a cave all week. That's where I made my living down. And we went and had a good time. But have you ever been there when they turn that light off? You stick a finger in your eye, you can't see it. Why? You have an absolute absent. Now, when I use absolute, let me go back to, I don't know that you can have an absolute absence of light any more than you can draw a absolute vacuum. But at the same time, if you're not used to it, to me it was comforting. I used to be able to go to sleep, turn the light out in the mines, lay back and sleep for hours. I had no problem. I was used to the dark. But to other people, it's a smothering thing. Now, what he's doing, a third part of the sun, the third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars. And the Bible said, and the day shone not for a third part, and the night likewise. A couple of years ago, we had that big eclipse of the sun. Y'all remember that? I didn't think it was going to be, I've seen eclipses before, but they were always partial. So Barbara and I went out on our back deck, and when it started getting dark, it got black. The crickets started chirping all over the place, just like they would at night. I mean, they was cutting up all over the place. And when the light started coming back in, all the chickens started crowing. The roosters and everything, you could hear them all over the place, just like it was out on the farm. That was one of the most amazing things to me, to sit through a total eclipse. Matter of fact, we were right in the middle of that thing. We had it lined up. But I thought about the effect it has on people mentally. You go up north, what happens when you've got 6 months of light and 6 months of dark? That messes with your mind. When people see that darkening effect, it does something to people mentally. This COVID-19, one of the greatest things that came out of this, I'm talking about bad thing, was not that it made people sick, but it made people stay in and sequester themselves from everybody else. And you had a lot of people with a lot of mental problems. You had a lot of suicides. You had a lot of people, they did not know how much they were affected until they finally got back out of the house again to find out how they'd been affected, and it affected them greatly. Now, he's darkening the day, he's darkening the night, he's darkening the heavens. They've got enough light to get around, folks. But I cannot, with all this going on, these are simultaneous events. While everything's burning over in verse number 7, we find everything turning into blood in 8 and 9. In 10 and 11, we find the waters become bitter. 12, we find the darkening and all these things. This is a progressive judgment of God that just keeps getting worse and worse. They still won't get right with God. You know, I believe you can get right with God basically any time. Now, I say basically any time. Don't play games with God. Some people say, I live for the devil all my life, and then when I get done living for the devil, I'm going to come give my life to Christ. That doesn't work. No. Very seldom does that work. Most people that do that, they don't want to. Deathbed repentance. I believe you can get saved on your deathbed, but I believe if you make a bargain with God, I'm going to live for myself, and when I get ready to close my eyes in death, I'm going to give you what's left. It doesn't work out that way. So we find God now is progressively, because of their rejection. You need to understand, 144,000 of the greatest preachers who ever lived carried the gospel of Jesus Christ around this world. Multitudes got saved, but these people continually reject God. They don't want anything to do with Him. They just put Him out, so to speak. I made a statement the other day, I don't know if it was right. They think they're throwing God under the bus. Let me tell you, you don't throw God under the bus, friend. Now look at verse number 13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of the heavens, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe. You know what, woe? You ever had something happen, boy, and you say, woe is me. That angel triples that woe. Why? Because now there's going to be the voices of the trumpet of the last 3 angels which have not yet sounded. You think these verses are bad. You wait and see what he does with the rest of these trumpets. So it pronounces a woe upon this earth. They won't get right with God. Somebody said, I wish they'd all go to heaven. You can't put them in heaven. They don't. Hey, did you know a sinner wouldn't like heaven anyway?
No.
I put on that sign out there years ago, if you don't like church here, you won't enjoy heaven one bit. And somebody thought, if you didn't like this church, that you wouldn't enjoy heaven. So, I got a letter from a lady, and she kind of tried to chew me out over it. But I just said, if you don't like church down here, don't go to heaven. Heaven's going to be church all the time. Heaven's going to be worship. It's going to be praise. Hey, we're going to have a ball when we get to heaven. Hey, I have a ball in church. I enjoy coming to the house of God. Now, what's happening here, he beheld that flying through the heavens, saying in a loud voice. What's he doing? He's telling the whole world that you're going to regret where you are by the voices of these trumpets that are yet to sound. I want to deal with this for why he destroys the ecology of the earth, the oceans of the earth. He's now changing the heavens of the earth. You say, why would he do it to this earth? Because this earth is cursed. This earth is cursed. God will one day, and we'll get to that in Revelation chapter 21, when he said, behold, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. He said the former was passed away. He's going to have to renovate this thing. Boy, aren't you glad that you're not going to be here? I thank God for that tonight. I'm glad. I thank God I got saved. I gave my heart to Christ. I get to go to heaven. All this and heaven too. And I'm looking forward to being on the other side. Amen. You stand, we're going to have an invitation tonight. I don't know if I followed a whole lot with your notes.